wrapped around your soul with no control.
I'm Manuel Lemos, the developer and maintainer, administrator of the PHP Classes site. As you may know, the PHP Classes site is a whole site, exists since 1999, and it was created to provide a means for a community to share their work in the form of the open source components written in PHP. But today, I'm here to share pieces of advice for any PHP developer on how to become better by following modern and efficient practices. I'm going to split this presentation in different parts, one for each advice. So stay tuned, because you may need to see one advice at a time, either in video or as an article. Okay, so I'm going to start with the first advice. But first, I'd like to tell you that a few months ago, the PHP Classes site completed 22 years of existence, thanks to the thousands of developers and the PHP community that shared their work on the site, as well many hundreds of thousands of other developers that benefited from contributors' work. While the site is getting closer to the 23rd anniversary in 2022, I'm publishing a series of small articles to give 10 pieces of advice on becoming a better PHP developer by following modern and efficient practices. So this article is a way that I found to retribute to you that help to make the PHP Classes site a fantastic community of PHP developers. So one type of advice is about technical practices. Probably you are more interested in that as a developer, but I also provide a different kind of advice that is about the quality of life. Basically, how to make you happier, not only as a developer, but in general as a person. I also give advice about good business practices. Okay, so read this article or watch this video to learn more about exciting advice types for you. First, I'd like to tell you why it is important to get good advice. PHP itself was created in 1995, and many years have passed. PHP evolved a lot over time. Therefore, PHP developers also need to evolve to continue to be relevant like PHP is after all these years. PHP evolved. They got advice from other developers that are not core developers there. They have knowledge on how to make PHP better. So therefore, following good advice is great for you as a developer and for the community as a whole. So here are several types of advice that I suggest that you follow to evolve a PHP developer. You're not required to follow all the advice, just follow the advice that makes sense for you. Okay, so in the end, we'll invite you to collaborate and share your own advice, because you probably also have good advice to give. Okay, so what pieces of advice you can get as a developer? The first advice is be a good community member, sharing your open source work in community sites. So as you know, the PHP Classes site is one community site, but there are others that are specific to PHP, others are more general. So one of those sites that you may know that is very popular is GitHub. So GitHub is a site that hosts open source projects and stores the repositories with all versions of the code files and other types of files that each project has to keep the history and also maintain the different contributions from different developers. So GitHub built around the Git program that was created by Linus Torvalds and his collaborators, and it became probably one of the largest resources for developers in general, not just PHP, but other languages like JavaScript, Python, Java, JavaScript, many other languages. So it's very large and very popular. So one way to be a good community member is to share your open source work in GitHub. Another community, as I mentioned, obviously I'm going to talk just very briefly about the PHP Classes site that was created, as I mentioned, in 1999 and continues to be a great resource for developers that share their open source components in the form of classes as objects. So it's very specific to object-oriented programming. So use object-oriented programming is a good thing because it promotes the reuse of components by other developers, and also the same components that you use in a project you can use in a different project. So object-oriented programming was the focus of this site. Okay, you can contribute to the site not only with classes of objects, packages made of multiple classes of objects, tutorial articles, and other means that will be available later, because the site continues to evolve and provides more resources that will be useful for you and for the communities as a whole. So PHP Classes is on the site. PHP Classes also support importing packages from GitHub. It's not really redundant because the focus of PHP Classes site is not only in PHP, is also object-oriented programming, but we also focus on advertising the actual packages. There is an effort that GitHub doesn't do because it's not their focus. Their focus is more to provide repositories, and those repositories can be shared and forked, create copies, so other developers can continue to evolve those projects independently. So PHP Classes support importing packages, and in PHP Classes there are very good initiatives that use gamification, mechanics of games that make the site look like a game. It's not a real game, but make it look like a game, like missions and levels and badges, innovation awards, master awards that focus on the tutorial articles that you can write for the benefit of other developers that want to learn how to use your components. So the site evolved. It has grown to near 1.6 million registered users and continues to grow. It's really great to participate in this community. I participate not only as a developer, but I also have my own components there, but I can also moderate the other components, sometimes improving the descriptions to make them clear to the other developers that come to the site. Okay, another resource that is also held is Pair. Pair is a repository of open source packages based also on PHP objects, but it is controlled by the PHP core developers. It has a certain contribution rules that are very strict. It's up to them to define those rules. And Pair exists for a long time. It's not so active, but it's still alive and continues to be alive like the PHP project. Another popular repository is Packages. Packages was developed by the developers of Composer. Composer is a great tool to install packages and any dependencies. It's something like Pair have done in the past, but in a different way. It's more flexible, it's more modern, and it's a good thing. PHP Classes also supports Composer, so you can use the Composer tool to install packages that are on the PHP Classes site. That's good. The PHP Classes site also supports installing packages with Composer that are not really made up objects. I mean, with all the rules that certain developers implement, like those that follow the PHP standard recommendations. And this is not a requirement because it's very flexible. And in that sense, you may be able to install certain packages that probably are not in packages. It's up to each developer to understand and decide which repository can be best to publish their work. Personally, I have the recommendation I had, but now I want to also talk about PHP frameworks. PHP frameworks got very popular because they help developing whole applications using the same set of components. It's not just simple classes, it's more complex classes that are dependent on each other and perform complex operations. And this is great. Many developers use PHP frameworks, others don't. It's okay, it's up to each one to decide. But for you that are a PHP developer, it's also great to contribute to those other frameworks that exist. So what you can do is to contribute somehow to the development of those frameworks. You can contribute to those frameworks with suggestions, bug fixes, bug reports, feature improvements. It's up to each community of each framework to decide how you can contribute and how you would like to participate in those communities. Another type of community inside the PHP community is open source applications like WordPress or Drupal, WooCommerce, MediaWiki, many other popular applications that are very useful and are used in many sites. And if you can contribute to these projects, it would be great because you'll be helping yourself and also helping others. So that's the great spirit of collaboration in the PHP community and specifically to certain applications that are very popular. Finally, one last advice related with participating in these communities that are part of the PHP community and also other projects that are outside the PHP project is to decide which open source repository or community you should contribute. Personally, I advise all that you can. There is not one that is better because they are different. They are for different purposes. They have certain advantages and disadvantages. It's up to you to decide which one makes more sense for you. You can participate in different projects. Participating in one does not exclude you from participating in another project. I always suggest to participate in all that makes sense for you. So if you want to participate in many of them, it's up to you. You need to decide how to make good use of time. Okay?
Can you feel it wrapped around your soul?